Greetings and welcome to the Being Your Own CEO Success Circle. And this morning we're going to do some thinking about change. But before we do that, let's do a few introductions. So let's see. Fred, you were the last one here, so how would you like to be the first one to introduce?
Sounds like a plan. Hi, I'm Fred Jones, the creator of Our Future Leaders, where we assist young people to gain communication and leadership skills so they can face the changes that are going on in the world. And today's topic is about changes. I'm located on the west coast of Canada on Vancouver Island, not far from LowellAnn, close to where Jay hangs out in Langford at the moment. So we had a bit of wind this morning. I don't know what you saw, LowellAnn, but it was very windy for a while early this morning.
It was raining. It was pouring rain actually early, but the sun seems to be out now. So the last few days has been like that. It goes from pouring rain to sunshine to pouring rain. It just goes in circles. So welcome here, Fred. Glad you made it.
Thank you.
And Vivek?
Namaste. My name is Vivekanand. Literally, it means wisdom and happiness. I am proud to share my belief with Steve Jobs and Leonardo da Vinci, who said simplicity is the ultimate in sophistication. I aim to bring time-tested wisdom and happiness together into your business and life by unifying, simplifying, and amplifying simple technology and tools. Wake Technology Private Limited is my company. Together, let us wake up our potential. So, yeah, we are talking about change today. There has been a lot of change in the weather around where I am. Of course, UK, United Kingdom, is popular for its changing weather. It's we have a saying which is like, if you don't like the weather right now, wait for 5 minutes. It might change for the better or for the worse. Either way.
We have that expression here too, Vivek. You don't like the weather, wait a minute.
Yeah, but here I think UK is affected by mainly two weather systems. One is the Gulf Stream, the other is the jet stream. Both of them start from close to where United Kingdom is. So it's the starting point of all trouble.
Oh. Okay. Right on. So glad you're here, Vivek. And Vivek is going to share his screen shortly because OBS makes it almost impossible for me. So David, how would you like to introduce yourself?
You forgot Paul.
I haven't forgotten him.
Oh, okay. Because I was here first and he was not last. So anyway, I'm Dave Flannery with Affordable Websites for Small Business here in Rock Falls, Illinois, the United States. Pleasure being here. We are broadcasting through YouTube and through the website, although the website sound is a little bit low, but it's audible. And we have no one in chat as of yet.
Okay.
Okay. So back to you, LowellAnn.
Okay. Thank you. There's Nathan just coming in. So Paul, how would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm just around the corner from LowellAnn, so that's a good thing to be in our hood, I think. And I have a company called TTG International Management, and we like to think of your business journey as a trip that you're on, and we're kind of your Sherpas. We're the people that will help you with finding your way. And when the heavy lifting becomes too much, we can provide you with the people to do that as well. So back to you, LowellAnn.
I'm happy you're here, and of course everybody out there should know we've all been sitting here chit chatting now for darn near an hour. So David, I see you waving.
Yes, Javita has entered chat and says hello to everybody.
Well, good morning, Javita. Welcome here. I'm glad you made it with us. And Nathan, long time no see. How are you doing? How would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Nathan Siegel, formerly from Victoria, so I'm not around the corner from you anymore. I'm south of Guadalajara in Mexico. Been down here for about 7 years now. And what I've been working on in a major way is podcasting, helping people to build podcasts and also setting up one for myself, getting back into it after an absence, and realizing that one of the things I love the most is talking to people and hearing their stories. And podcasting is a great way to do it.
Oh,
That's it.
And you obviously need some good interview skills.
Yes, well, yes, it's true. And that's part of what I'm doing with people as well, is if they have trouble with talking to people, if they have trouble with confidence, knowing what to say, all that, there's a coaching aspect to what I do as well. But primarily, at least, it's in two parts. The podcasting stuff, helping people get it set up, building on a site that they have, building a new site, coaching, and then the rest of it is just me podcasting, talking to people. And I'm giving myself a challenge this week to get on Clubhouse and start learning how to use that system.
Oh.
Yeah.
Clubhouse, eh?
Clubhouse.
I thought Clubhouse had died.
No, it has not. It's very much alive.
I heard that it was going to die.
I don't think so, not according to my sources.
Right.
Well, one of my sources just got honored by the people who run Clubhouse, and they want to do some sort of major deal with him because of what he's been doing. And he's had a lot of success on Clubhouse, and apparently a lot of other people have as well.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay, so welcome here, everybody.
Thank you.
And just by way of a little bit of context, our last 3 Success Circle topics have come about as a result of fairly major change. So we decided today that we'll explore the concept of change and discuss what specific changes that we can foresee. So I put together a little bit of a presentation which Vivek is going to share with us. So there is, I'm assuming everybody can see that. So the topic for today is thoughts about change. So I'll just wave Vivek when you want to change page. So I thought I would begin by exploring how change works, and as you can see from this, there's a YouTube link down at the bottom of the page there. This is can be found in a very interesting YouTube, and there is a series that talks about change and talks about systems. And this one, this picture that you're seeing here is part of the very first one. Very interesting approaches. So this is known as the 2 loops theory of organizational change, and it's a model that tries to describe non-linear emergent processes of change within complex organizations. And the thing that jumped out for me, yes, it's being described as being how it works in an organization. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized that it applies to it can apply to society as well on a grander scale. So, and I guess it's important to talk about, or just to clarify, because I think Vivek, you said it's not a loop. He was thinking of a loop as something that was joined in a different way. But anyway, this is what they call the two loop model. So as you can see on the left hand side where it says the dominant system, so you've got a system that is dominant right now and it's working, and there are all kinds of people that are very, very committed and working in the dominant system. But at the same time, when down below you, when you see the innovators or the innovations, there are people that don't buy into the dominant system. There's youth that are looking for something different, and they start looking at alternatives. And maybe there's something they don't like about the dominant system, and they begin to think about ways to what needs to be done. And as more and more people begin to think that way, then they start to connect, and you can see there that there's a lot of connections happen. And so then eventually there's an emerging system that begins to take place. And it gains momentum, and it gets nourished a bit, or people start supporting it and looking at it and thinking about it, etc., until it looks like there's kind of a tipping point. And of course, what's going on with the dominant system? They're the ones that want to keep everything the way it was. And there's a lot of resistance, etc. But then as time goes on, they begin to realize that the emerging system is gaining and gaining momentum, and they have to figure out how to make that jump from the old system into the new system. And so you can see that there's that transition period that happens. So I found this was really helpful to me in really just understanding what happens when change, what's going on when change is occurring. So we can go to the next screen. So, but I began to realize that in order to understand and to cope, a shift in ourselves is necessary. So we need to be able to change the way we look at things from what is known as the linear mechanistic view that's everything, that says that everything goes on as it was. So if you look at a car, it just keeps on rolling. So so if we shift our thinking away from that to a life cycle view that recognizes that there is birth, there's a rise, there's a decline, there's a death cycle, and it repeats over and over and over. And of course, we know that applies to life, that applies to plants and growth. It applies to many things. And so if we can think of and understand things from a life cycle perspective, it's going to be a lot easier for us to deal with this. So going forward, I've been doing a lot of reading lately, as many of you may be doing, about what needs to happen, and we're recognizing that change happens to us, but sometimes we need to make change happen as well. So I made a list of some of the things that we need to pay attention to. So an awakening is needed, and boy, oh boy, have I started watching a number of really interesting things online that is really geared toward that sort of awakening, and systems thinking and systems acting. So when if we are thinking in terms of power and control and all of that, it takes in order for changes to happen, we need to start thinking in terms of systems and not just one way of doing things. We are going to need lots of creativity to overcome the complexity that is before us, for sure. And we need to learn how to navigate the loss of the old as well as supporting the new. So in that diagram, that transition place, these are that's the place where there's going to be, we need to recognize that it's going to be difficult for some people to make that transition, and so we need to find ways to help people make that change, for sure. And we're all going to have to get out of our comfort zone. Change. I mean, if we think of everything just being the same old, it's very comfortable. There's no question about that. But if we know that change has got to take place, we've got to be prepared to get out of that comfort zone. And we need to figure out how to use the gifts that we have to discover what our purpose is. So I've been watching a number of really interesting videos that are asking, what is the destiny of humanity? Heavy duty question that requires a lot of contemplation, I think. So as I started looking at what's going on in the world right now, it seemed to me that there are three major generators of change occurring here. The climate issues, of course, the COVID issues, and here in Canada, Indigenous reconciliation issues. And there are numerous changes that have taken place and will need to take place based on these three. So I started thinking to myself, all right, so what can we foresee in relation to those three issues? So if we were to say, if we look at reduction of carbon to the atmosphere, what do we foresee? And Vivek, you can go to the next screen. So if we speculate, what can we foresee if there's going to be, if we're going to reduce the amount of carbon that goes to the atmosphere? Anybody want to venture a guess of? Anybody? Dave.
One thing that we'll see is that the temperatures will get colder. We'll go back to where especially if we reduce and reduce what's in the air too. The temperatures will go back to somewhat normal, which is colder, which will tend to make us want to use more ways to keep us warm.
Right.
And so we gotta be prepared for that, because right now it's the middle of November and I've seen 3 frosts, and the leaves are still on here on the trees, and it's
Yeah.
today is going to be 60 degrees, which is not normal, and it's been 60 degrees. We've had a week or two of a little bit cooler temperature, normal temperatures, but we're right back into the warm temperatures again. So that's what I see. Javita is asking, can you explain indigenous?
Indigenous means the native populations. So indigenous in Canada are the First Nations people. The Aborigines in Australia are indigenous. So it's the original peoples on various continents. Yeah, I'm glad you asked, Javita. Okay. Anybody else want to foresee what we could expect to be happening if we reduce our carbon to the atmosphere? Anybody else? I made a list.
The medical bills of certain countries would certainly go down.
As a result of less carbon to the atmosphere?
Yes. And
can you explain that?
Because when you because that whole thing requires a change in lifestyle. When you change your lifestyle, it's hope that you would choose a more healthier lifestyle, which means you're
okay. I get it. Change in lifestyle. All right.
Yeah, because as far as I have understood, the Americans use almost the same amount as India's whole budget for their medical bills, which is amazing. But
yeah, okay.
Compared to the number of people, and it's just medical bills are just too much.
Okay, David.
Javita's saying that we'll have better ozone.
We will have better ozone.
Yeah, we won't have the ozone problems that we have.
Oh,
yeah. Around us, we've taken care of a lot of that, so we don't have it as bad as the other countries do. Like Mexico City, I imagine any large city in India or China or that, they all have. I mean, people were wearing masks before in China and India, but it wasn't because they were afraid of getting flu. It was because of the air they were breathing, and they thought it would help.
Right. So an improvement in the air qualities. Okay. Well, here's the list that I was looking at. A reduction of resource extraction. Here in Canada, that in BC, that's in Canada, reduction of oil and gas and forestry. And those industries are going to have to reduce. I read a really interesting article, which I shared with David in a local newspaper here, where the author was looking at all of the climate things and some of the speculation that people have thought about extracting stuff out of the air and putting it in the ground and all of that. And he explores all of those items and doesn't think that those are practical. The second article, he talks about the fact that in order for us to deal with this, we need to shrink our economies back to pre-1970 style or earlier. And I thought, wow, that's really going to be interesting, because if a lot of industries are having to stop or change or whatever, then that's going to have an effect on the economy. And something else that I can foresee is changes in food production. The way our factory farms are creating more and more problems for our climate. Something else connected to the economy would be localized production. So if we can produce things on a local basis, then we don't have to fly things and ship things and all of that. And so I think that there's going to be a rise in local production. And based on that, there's going to be a rise in prices. And businesses are going to have to look at their business models. They're going to look at business sustainability as opposed to business growth. And there's going to be a reduction of delivery and long-range trade, etc. So that when all these industries have to change, the economy is going to change, and it's going to have a ripple effect. So that's a list of things that have come up for me as I've been reading and thinking. So David.
Javita's added better nature and environment.
Yes. I agree. So certainly our and we need to be paying attention to our trees. Big time. Okay, so if we took so if we went to the third item and looked at an indigenous reconciliation, what do we predict that might be happening there? Anybody have any ideas?
Paul, I think, had a point for the previous one, but
oh, sorry, I can't see everybody on my screen at the same time. So, oh, there I can. There, I just fixed it. So, Paul, did you want to say something about the climate part?
Not exactly about the climate, but everything that you've talked about indicates a reduction in personal standard of living.
Yes.
And so let me ask you, when will the wars start? When will people say, I am not accepting this, I am going to fight it?
it's already started, Paul.
Well, exactly.
It's already on.
Yeah.
It's already on.
Yeah. You know, when we look at this, at the diagram that you put up, I think of another diagram, and that's the one we're all familiar with about the adaptation of a new product.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you have your early adapters, but then you have that giant chasm that has to be gotten across. And I think one of the challenges right now is getting across that chasm. And I don't think people are doing a very good job the way they're talking about any of this, of trying to bridge that chasm. And here's just one example that I'll give. We're talking about reductions of fossil fuel. How are you going to get a ship across the ocean?
Exactly.
there's two ways that seem to be practical. One is the use of LNG, and LNG carriers are already doing that. And for example, here we're looking at converting our ferries. And the other is something that's been going on for years, and that's nuclear. But both of those have people that are opponents to it. So it's this bridging that gap that I think is the real challenge. We talk about all of these long-term stuff, but we're not going to get there unless we start bridging the gap in a way that people can accept and think, okay, this is a way forward that I can accept the impact of. So that's my comment on that.
Well, and Paul, when you say that, I mean, something that occurred to me, and that transition piece, there are going to be people that need a lot of emotional support on accepting those things and looking and finding ways to think in different ways. There's going to be a real need for a lot of climate coaching, I guess, would be what it's called, whatever. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the indigenous reconciliation, and what we're already seeing here in Canada is there are stronger indigenous demands. We're as more indigenous people are going to college and going to universities and so forth. They're becoming the whole population is becoming stronger and making greater demands. At the same time, there's going to be a greater awareness of the needs of our indigenous folks by the whole population. I see that happening. I see new collaboration models developing, that in order to make all of this reconciliation happen, we have to figure out better ways to communicate and to work together. And there's going to be more focus on environmental sustainability, and almost everything I've read and seen about consciousness raising, etc. The indigenous approach to our environment is entirely different from ours, and maybe they will be able to teach us a lot more than what we know. I think that there's a fabulous opportunity for First Nations people there. Anybody have any comments or reactions to that part? Fred.
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I think when we were talking about the indigenous people and we start looking at some of their traditional methods of even governing and the way they consider the environment is, and they go back 7 generations and look 7 generations ahead before they start making decisions. The fact that no one really in their I guess their culture owns the land. It belongs to everyone, and it is there for us to nurture. There are so many, as you said, different ideas that make a lot of sense compared to us, where we own and we pillage and we decide we're going to take all the forests away and we clear cut and we, mining. And I worked in the mining industry, so I know some of the challenges that we create when we're doing mining. Now, it's not as if these are problems that cannot be solved. It's just we have to look at different methodologies. And the indigenous people have some amazing approaches towards not only the environment and the land, but also on how they think about how they manage their lives, and in other words, they really think of community, very, very strong community. And we traditionally think about the individual. We want to compete.
Right.
They try and avoid competition. Not that they didn't always have some competition, but when you go down to their beliefs, it is really how we think about the community and even their justice system, their restorative justice. It's unbelievable. When you look at that, it makes so much more sense than throwing people in jail and saying, okay, we're going to punish you. Looking at what they do and their approaches to life, you can start second guessing what we've been doing. Is that really the best way? I think they have some really fantastic ideas. I would just mention there's a course called Indigenous Canada from the University of Alberta.
Yes.
And it is the history of history in Canada from the Indigenous viewpoint. And it is absolutely eye-opening to look at our country from their perspective rather than from what we've been taught. And it's really an eye-opener, that course.
Yes, I've taken that course. It's really worthwhile. Yeah.
It's a fantastic course.
Yeah. So I just stumbled on something else, and I have to thank Vivek for this. He sent me a link to an interview of an author who there's a new book come out that's called The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow. And basically, they're anthropologists, and they've gone back through history and have looked at the alternate ways of other cultures, the way they put things together, and have really recommended and talked about some different approaches that previous cultures have already tried. The way our culture has come together is not the only one, and not necessarily the successful one. One of the questions that when he talked about the indigenous approach, he talked about the fact that indigenous people have a different concept of property, as you mentioned, Fred. They don't see ownership of property. They see that they are part of the property. They are part of the land. So it's an entirely different mindset. So I see a lot of changes coming about as a result of our need to do this Indigenous reconciliation. There's lots of healing that has to happen, etc. But I see some very positive changes coming out of there. So the third item that I listed was COVID, and when we look at that, we've already recognized that COVID has brought about new socializing patterns that were not there before. It's brought about a greater dependence on technology that wasn't there before. It has brought about some massive changes in education and the way education is delivered. It has brought about a great deal of stress to our emergency systems. So there's some major changes that are going to happen there. And it's bringing about less international travel. And it's bringing about a shift in employment, shifting employment. People going, either working at home or deciding that they don't want to do that anymore and doing something different. It's brought about a whole lot of things, as well as staff shortages. Like, we look at a lot of our local companies here, they're struggling because they don't have the staff. So those were some of the things that I started realizing. So, Vivek, if we could move on to the next one. So, so I started thinking, all right, we've got all these changes. That when we look at all those things that I listed in those 3 sections, we are looking at a massive cultural, societal, economic changes. So what is that? How is that? What does that mean for us? So I started looking at that, and you can see my list on the left-hand side. These are the higher demands that I see, where there's going to be a higher demand for training. When people are changing employment, shifting employment, industry is changing, there's going to be a higher demand for training. We're going to see more people choosing self-employment. Lots of people, because of COVID, have started working from home, and they want to stay working at home. And so they may look at doing various kinds of self-employment. There's going to be a higher demand for efficient connectivity. When we have a greater need for technology, then it's got to be more and more efficient. And there's going to be a higher demand for learning platforms, different kinds of platforms, and so forth. And I see this one as a big one: disappearance of built-in obsolescence. So if all of those things, and David, when you were talking about your fixing your dryer, that's what I was thinking, is that production has got to stop. Building things, making things that are only going to last a year, so that the landfills get full. I read an article here not very long ago that said our landfill is so full of clothing, disposed of clothing, that's only been used for a year. Now, what does that kind of production is never gonna, given all the other things, it can't remain that way. So on the right-hand side, you can see that I thought, well, there's a lot of things people are going to have to learn how to do. So I talked about device repairs and phones and computers and bikes and toasters and whatever else. I read another article that talked about a return to the land. Now, this sounds very utopian. But if we have to change the way our food is produced, perhaps more people are going to have to grow their own food. And so maybe people will go back to learning how to homestead. Maybe people will have to learn how to grow food in an urban setting. Currently, I grow quite a bit of food on my balcony, and I would guess that there are lots of people that don't know how to do that. Same with sewing and knitting and quilting, all of those home skills that have disappeared. I would see that there's going to be a return to a lot of those things, and COVID actually brought about, with people staying at home more, there has been a resurgence of all of those items. And the same, I would say, in terms of new cooking methods. So maybe there's going to be a lot more reliance on dried foods, for example, and learning how to cook and healthy foods rather in our own kitchens, rather than buying processed prepackaged foods. So those are just things that came off the top of my head. I wonder if anybody in the group has thought or can think of other needs that may come up for solopreneurs.
I don't know about other needs, but I have tried to do some stuff that you've been talking about, like growing food on my porch. That's a lot harder than it seems.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need to learn more. I need to have there will be a higher demand this winter for me to learn what I did wrong because I was not very successful. And that's one of the few times that I've been growing food for a long, long time in my own garden and was very successful with that. And
Yeah.
for my first try at container dry gardening, it was a total failure. So
Yeah.
I got to figure out what I did wrong.
There's a lot to learn. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I cook my plants so I have them in a spot where they get essentially too much sunlight. They're on a cement patio, and the cement patio heats up
Mm-hmm.
very quickly, and it's exposed to the sun,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they cook the plants instead of allowing them to grow. So, but if I put them under the roof, then they don't get enough sunlight. So I got to figure out where I can stick them that's convenient
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and not gonna overheat them.
So, I mean, when you look at the urban situation, I mean, the practice now is everybody has to have a lawn, and it has to be mowed, etc., etc. Now, there are a few people in Victoria here that are growing all kinds of things on their front lawn rather than growing grass. And so there are going to be people that are going to need to learn how to do more of that, for sure. I mean, it's really quite, and there are a few apartment buildings here in town that have on their roofs they have things growing up on the top of their buildings, etc. The other thing that we've noticed here in Victoria is there is a push toward having people use their cars less and use bicycles and all kinds of other little mechanized vehicle type things. And that has created a lot of pushback in Victoria. A lot of people who drive don't appreciate the bike lanes, but looking down the road, perhaps those bike lanes will become are more and more necessary. That we certainly can see they're being used a lot more. So I mean, this was just a kind of a brainstorm off the top of my head. But Vivek, if you go to the next screen, I am asking what do solopreneurs need to do now? Anybody have any suggestions?
Well, the training aspect of things, getting involved in that would be something that would be very advantageous for a solopreneur, because there's going to be a lot of training that's going to need to be done, and people are going to be looking for it, and you could make a nice little business out of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, our last experience with this whole Windows 11, we talked about, it's going to create a lot of problems. So what we did was we said, okay, let's do some brainstorming about what are our alternatives. And so we came up with 3 or 4 alternatives, and we explored what those alternatives might be. It seems to me that as we see a major shift happening, coming, that's what we need to be doing, is trying to look at alternatives and trying to look down the road rather than just reacting to what's happening right this very moment. We need to need to be looking far down the road to see if we can figure out what is going to be needed and how we might be able to fill that need. Yeah. Anything else? Anybody else? What do you think you need to do, Paul? I mean, in terms of your business, what do you need to do?
Retire.
Fold it up, eh?
Yeah, that's time. Never mind. Go for a walk. Have a good day. Enjoy what's left of what I know. pull a rug over my head. No, the challenge with change, and we talked about it earlier, is we see everything that we've sort of talked about is logical, but the resistance to change is emotional.
Yes.
And people don't have enough experience. Most people, I'm going to say, don't have enough experience with change. There's nothing in school is ever taught about change and how to manage it. So the value of having systems in place so that if you're going to change, there's a map of what's there and where the change could take. This is a massive problem, and the disruptions are going to be very, very large. As a solopreneur, I think the only thing you can do is take a look at, as you said, at what you're doing and what you can change. The other thing is you can only change so much. So I think people need to start ranking, putting a hierarchy in place of, okay, in my business, what's going to change? So we know Windows is going to change. And then, so we know what's going to change and what we'd like to change. And then we need to prioritize it so that we can tackle some of these things in a manner that small business people are used to doing it. And looking ahead is very important. It's very hard to see what changes are going to happen, but you have to be looking at new things all the time to see how they maybe would work for you. So that's all I got.
Mm-hmm. It's not an easy. It's not what we're talking about is going to be difficult. We know it's going to be difficult, and yeah.
Not only difficult, I think it's going to be overwhelming for a good number of people.
Yes,
I think the two-loop model, which I've brought up back on the screen here, I think has something to tell us about how probably we can handle. We probably need to handle this part.
Mm-hmm.
How do we handle the hospicing of the dominant systems and give them a graceful death, as it were?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean it's what do they call them? Death doulas. Here in town, they call them death doulas. So maybe there's a role there for many of us to
because as far as I understood the model, this model says that the dominant system has to, once it dies, it has to decompose. I mean, pardon the biological analogy, but that's what that compost means.
Right.
So that the components then become part of the emerging system so that they still continue to be useful in some other way. The knowledge becomes useful, the experience becomes useful in a different way. So I think that part needs to be addressed more
So
in greater detail.
from a solopreneur's perspective, to be thinking about what could we do to support that hospicing. Yeah.
Yeah. How do we, I mean, Paul joked about retiring. Yes, we do need to retire people and so on, and do that gracefully and while making use of their knowledge, experience in training new people, which is what Paul is doing already. So doing more of what you are doing, Paul.
Yeah, for sure. So I like that idea of you know trying to figure out how to hospice that. Of course, I would like that idea because that's what coaches do. Is they like to help people overcome their overwhelm and get organized and become accountable to themselves and all of those good things. Yeah.
I think we've all had a good example of how not to do it with COVID. You just, if you have a system and you put a bullet in it and stop it, there's just a huge fallout from that and unintended circumstances. So as you wind things down and start the transition, you're going to discover that even the new way that you're looking at things has significant challenges as well. So you're just replacing old challenges with new ones, but hopefully you're moving forward. That's the mindset that's hard to get the emotional drive behind in any organization. I think large organizations are going to, I say this and then I look around and go, well, what's the example? But I think larger organizations are going to fall apart because there's too large a gap between the customer and the decision makers. And I think that people, now that they have direct access to the product user has better access back to the product producer. I think that larger organizations are going to fall apart. Now, having said that, I look at Amazon and wonder whether I'm an idiot.
Right. But it makes you sort of wonder whether Amazon has really got got a handle on where things are going.
Well, LowellAnn, the German company, is just finishing or starting or in the process of building the largest solar farm in Alberta, and Amazon is already contracted for all the power.
Yeah.
So, when you say they're thinking ahead, all right.
Wow.
They're thinking about their electric trucks and operating their warehouses. So, yeah.
Well, but
so it makes you wonder.
But when you look at things like local production and small business, I mean, those are those two things. When the economy starts falling apart, that's where it has to go.
Okay, so, no, I don't disagree, but then the price goes up.
Absolutely.
And can people afford to pay it?
Yeah.
There's the challenge.
Yeah.
It would definitely call for a change in lifestyle. So
big time.
Yeah. And people don't like change.
As part of my, the job that I do, I do find people who are spending hundreds of pounds a day on things which are not really required at all. I wonder how come things like they spend it on lottery, scratch cards, which is another form of lottery, alcohol, cigarettes,
peanut butter,
pet food.
Yeah.
And I find people spend nearly 100 pounds on all these other things, and when it comes to food that they are going to eat, they are going for the reduced item, reduced, and which is going out of date today. Why?
Yeah. They're not making very good choices, you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Lifestyle is
Mm-hmm.
way out of
Yeah.
logic.
Yeah. So the other thing that I keep thinking about, and I guess this is where my own approach has gone, is I'm doing everything I can to facilitate my own consciousness raising, so that I'm trying to sort of look at as many approaches so that um, I can understand and support people that are going to need um, what what is what is before us. I see David is waving to us. He has another meeting, so thank you, David. Yeah. So we are at the top of the hour. Um, Fred, would you like to have the last word?
I I think I'd have probably want to have more than a word, though. Unfortunately, this is a challenge that the world faces. This is not something simple. Change, and it has to change. We realize that, and you've given a good many good examples of what has to happen and what's going to change, including, well, everything. That's basically it. Everything is going to change. It's not that it's not going to change, and people will have to. Some will not like it. Some will, as Paul said, there'll probably be wars and fighting and arguing and etc. But overall, in the end result is going to change. There's no doubt about it. And what can a solopreneur do? Well, a lot of those items we can, as you say, coach. Now, you can say, oh, I want to be a coach, but if you're a good gardener and you know how to garden
Mm-hmm.
on in the urban and not in the rural area, you have a job. You can help people with that skill.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can knit and sew and fix things, you have another task that you can teach. So there's a lot of opportunities in the solopreneur world to help people with the knowledge that you have, share it, and I'll use the word coach again, because that's really what you're doing. You're training them or coaching them on how to do it, because the biggest challenge is people
Mm-hmm.
and not wanting to change.
Yeah.
And it's funny that just arrived on my desk earlier today before this. There was an article in its website called, I think it's called Management 3, trying to change the whole approach to management. And they were talking about change management. Now, when I sold project management software, the biggest challenge we had was for people, here's a better way of managing your projects. But now to get them to adapt and do this and change the methodology, that was the biggest challenge. Not here's a solution that will help you, but now are you going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that was the thing. I even had a presentation that I would do. Okay, all right, you bought it. That's the easy part. Now implementing it,
Yes.
that's the challenge.
Yeah.
And I would sit with them online and say, okay, here's what you got to do, and go through the whole process. And that's called change management. And there are change managers around. And if you look at what the biggest role is, and this is what this article said this morning is, and I agree totally with this, if you're a change management, the best thing you can do is to listen to people, understand their behaviors, their longings, their fears, what makes them happy, what makes them sad. Before you even introduce this, you have to listen with empathy and find out where they're at in their mind, and then, okay, how are we going to bring you to this new change? This is what it's all about when you really come down, and we can prevent those wars that Paul was talking about and help people, but it's going to happen. There was a very interesting article about blockchain and what that's going to do, which was similar to what Paul said about the big companies are going to be challenged. They are.
when you look at how blockchain is going to empower the individual to do things, and there's a very and we don't have time for me to go into that, but it's fascinating to know what you as an individual will be able to do using blockchain without having to get governments involved and even big companies involved. Because of that, it'll be programmed that if this happens, this happens. You don't have to argue with anybody. It won't. If it doesn't happen, then the result will not happen because a blockchain will make it. You don't need lawyers the same we did. You don't have to go to courts and argue because it's all coded. And people can run small businesses, and it'll help the individual. So its world is changing. There's no doubt about it, and a lot of people are going to be dragged kicking and screaming because they won't. But by necessity, I mean, COVID-19 was a nice little litmus test because a lot of people have changed, and other people say, I don't, I hate this.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's a fantastic. This is the biggest challenge. So it's all about people, really, not the systems. Systems. There's some great ideas and great systems, but boy, implementing them is going to be the challenge. So that's really what I see. Change management is, and there are jobs of change managers. How do you implement it? Yeah. And it's all about how do you cope with people and convince them, and that's a challenge.
Okay, so there's our big challenge is how do we help people make necessary changes?
And solopreneurs can help.
How can we support them?
Yep.
Well, thank you, Fred. I appreciate that. I think it's time for us to close. I'll do that by saying how it's important to do what you love with passion. And I can't possibly tell you what we're going to talk about next week because I don't know. So
it's all change.
Yes.
That is the change.
So having said that, I will do the outro and we will see you next week.